Hi. I guess I could ask my question a couple of different ways, but I'm just thinking about a paradox. When we try to think about the future, we try to have sort of mental maps or rules or graphs that even indicate what it could look like or what type of events we should be looking for. But is that restraining ourselves in the way we think about the future if we think that there is a model, we just don't know where the events fit on that model? And especially I'm looking at one of the slides that you have where let's say we're trying to identify disruptions, and we know, or it appears we know that a common element is the destruction of monopolies and the appearance of competition.
Right.
It really looks like that's an interpretation of the past that's based on sort of looking at market liberalization events.
Right.
And we could think about these events in a number of different ways, and that would mean that we would have a different graph, and we would sort of locate the events on that graph or on another type of sort of graph or interpretative model. Is that constraining, and how do you overcome that paradox if you want to think about the future without any rules?
Okay, and well, let me start off. The graph that the term is punctuated equilibrium, which to me carries along the concept that there is an era and it goes along for a while, and we're in one right now, and we should extrapolate that out for a while. But then we realize that someday there will be a punctuation, and this era will come to an end. The trends will stop, new trends will start. Policies that were absolutely fantastic in the existing era will not be good policies in the new era, so we have to then rethink what we're doing. Now, when I talk about competition, I don't just mean economic competition. I mean the fact that, for instance, the internet is competing with standard kind of media outlets, whether they're businesses or whether they're government run. Now we are getting information in all kinds of different ways. So there is a competition of a new force against the incumbents. That could be politically, that could be economically, in anything. The new comes to compete with the old, and the old, which we've become comfortable with, all of a sudden looks obsolete. But what's the music industry doing with downloaded music? Oh, we're going to sue you, and we can't do that anymore. They're trying to hang on to the old era even while the new era is being born. So the graph is the one of era after era after era. That's the graph that I'm thinking of.
And would you say or think that this covers all potential futures,
I
like
think
this
so.
method? Yeah.
Huh? Okay. But you can't know which one is going to come. You can only what if and imagine alternative ones that could come. So one of the future slides you'll see there is the language of determinism. The language of facts is that this will happen. We don't encourage people to use that term because you don't know that. You should say this might happen. The problem is that sounds weak. It sounds wimpy. It's not strong, it's not declarative. We always said, be certain, push your idea, et cetera, et cetera. But frankly, the best you can say about the future is what might happen, not what will happen. So we encourage your use of that language among yourselves. This might be, that might be, and the what if type of talk. Great. Yes, ma'am.
Again, about the discontinuity of
Sure.
that. And whether or not there are ways to orchestrate such events. And I know that may seem strange to say that, but some of the problems we have, if we wait until there's an event, when it goes from the emerging to the framed, it's too late and it's a disaster.
Yep.
So if we can somehow get certain problems into the public realm earlier, we could achieve something.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent point. Let's start again. Inbound change is when the world changes us. It frames the issue, and then it gets out of control. But outbound change is taking action early on to prevent it from getting out of control, to do something before the world, because our influence literally shifts. The longer the era goes on, and particularly the longer we hang on to the old era, the more the world influence becomes, the pressure from the world becomes more and more and more, and we frankly lose resources and influence and the ability to have influence over our own future.
Let's go to the next question. Great. So there's a famous medical story in the 19th century where they looked at the rates of childbed fever where babies were dying, and they found that midwives had like a 1% death rate, like babies delivered by midwives, whereas medical doctors, it was something like 12%.
Yep.
And they found it was just, the solution was so simple, the doctors just had to wash their hands.
Yep.
That's all they had to do. And so it gave rise to this sense of cognitive dissonance where the doctors who embraced the change, all of a sudden the death rate of the babies they delivered went from 12% down to 1% within a year.
Yep.
Others, though, said, no, I've been doing this for 20 years. Don't tell me how to deliver babies. I know how to do this. And so the policy itself was really simple, wash your hands.
Yep.
But the actual change that had to arise was much harder
Yep.
because you had to kind of convince established people to adopt that policy. So when you were talking about what we're trying to do as a group to adopt good policies, is that enough, or in order for transformative change to happen, is it more than just creating good policies, but dealing with the cognitive dissonance of trying to ensure that these policies actually do get implemented by people that resist change?
Another great question, which I'm probably not going to answer, because that's really a whole nother talk. We're talking in this section of your experience with inbound change. What's going on in the world that will require us to change? The other talk that I have, which I maybe give somewhere later down the line, is then how do you go about creating that change and all the obstacles that you said. The old era has resistance built into it. It has, and its resistance is so strong because the data is all on its side. For the most part, and so is the habits of mind and the mental models and the established interests and the incumbents and all of that stuff. So you need tremendous power if you're going to try and change the era on purpose. To change it, you have, and a simple scientific experiment is not going to get doctors to give up their ego saying, I guess we've been wrong all along. Who's going to say that? No. And so you're dealing against emotions versus logic, and we know which one wins in that contest. So you are pointing out a really serious difficulty. I'd recommend we deal with that in a future session, because right now we really want to focus on the outside world, and we'll be back and talking about it. Yes, ma'am.
This is very similar, I guess, to Richard's, and we won't get into it too much, but I was quite taken by your term destructive creativity.
Yeah, right.
And that concept of destructive creativity, and was hoping you might be able to talk about, perhaps it will be in a future session, but on what tools we can have to facilitate that short-term buy-in for the long-term benefit, both within a micro level, within an organization, and on the more macro level, whether it be a societal or governmental level. So how can that be facilitated?
And Gladwell's book is a great one. Let me give you 3 books, and then we'll do that. James Collins' Good to Great. Fantastic, empirically based study of transformational change. John Kotter, Leading Change. He basically sets up 8 problems of change and then sets up 8 strategies or tactics to deal with it. And Bill Maurer, Maurer, Beyond the Wall of Resistance. That's really dealing with people who, exactly the folks who say, you mean we've had this policy for 30 years and we're going to change it? What's wrong with it? The answer is, it was great for those 30 years, but it's not going to be great for the next 30 years. Giving people the ability to save face because you're going to change something which they have, maybe they even created it, just like the doctors. They don't want to admit they've been killing people by not washing their hands. How stupid. You think a doctor would know that? Well, they're not going to let, So those 3 books are a good start into answering your question.